AI is eating the world, including Google. 5 AI enhancements SEOs can implement straight away with Bastian Grimm. The In Search SEO podcast is brought to you by Rank Ranger, the all-in-one SEO platform that helps scale your business through data and analytics. Hey, it's David. How is AI impacting Google, and how is this impacting SEO? And what can you do about it? That's what we're going to be covering today with a renowned expert in large-scale international SEO, managing massive sites and highly competitive industries. He has over 20 years' experience in online marketing, technical and global SEO, and was named Search Personality of the Year at the 2019 European Search Awards. A warm welcome to the In Search SEO podcast, Bastian Grimm.
Hey David, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Bastian. Well, you can find Bastian over at peakace.agency. So Bastian, how is AI impacting Google?
Yeah, I think on a very, very wide range of topics, to be honest, because it's such a diverse topic. I mean, we're still, I wouldn't say in the early days, and it's ramping up relatively quickly, but I think Google has been making a lot of changes and improvements over the last years. I mean, we all have, as SEOs, witnessed that, right? There were like algorithm updates and visual changes, and a whole bunch of that is either driven by, let's say, machine learning or, straight away kind of partially at least AI components. So, we have been already back in the day, been kind of confronted with the likes of BERT, right? And just recently, Google introduced MAM, which is kind of their recent push into all things AI that's, supposed to be making search results so much better. So, it's a broad topic that's to be kind of discussed, not only on search directly, but also like on the advertising front, right? Google is pushing a lot of advertisers to use, let's say, their autopilot for advertising campaigns. And obviously that kind of autopilot, if you so will, is also powered by AI/machine learning. So there's a really, really big and broad range of things that's happening. And I think it's a topic that the search marketing community in itself, but also especially probably SEOs, need to get familiar with and not be afraid of, because I think it's there's some really nice gains to be had if you understand where to start and how to utilize that, yeah.
And if you don't utilize it, then it'll come round and eat your lunch, and other SEOs will end up taking your business from you.
Most probably, right? I mean, SEO always has been a lot about scaling and being fast and taking advantage of things that are somewhat new, that are maybe even, from a conceptual perspective, a bit harder to understand. So you're completely right. If you're not acting now, then you will definitely be partially left behind, and this is something that we should prevent, shouldn't we?
So today you're sharing 5 AI enhancements SEOs can implement straight away. So starting off with number 1, content AI tools.
Yeah, I think this is kind of the most obvious and probably also the most, let's say, discussed and debated in the last years, right? So, I mean, especially with OpenAI, which is one of the biggest kind of companies behind a lot of the AI tech that has been released over the years, when they released GPT-3, which was just a while ago, I think this became really a mainstream topic. And I think a lot of the tooling out there that's now been built is utilizing the same tech or the same approach. So basically a very, very large set of training data, and you can use the tools. They kind of build interfaces on top of it, where you basically can do a lot of different things. But one of the things that they've been built for is that you can throw in a topic and a set of keywords and kind of pick a style, like let's say a blog post, or even shorter, just headlines for email marketing campaigns, etc., etc. And I think it's really worthwhile investigating, because you'd be significantly faster. And yes, I mean, granted, the debate that needs to be had is like the bigger the training data, so that means English language, obviously, the better the results. That's for sure. And you have like very small kind of, and I mean, no offense to any, country or language out there, but like, of course, if you have something like Norwegian, which is a language that's, not as popular as English, of course, the results or the output quality varies, but nevertheless, the concept is the same. And I think my first tip would be to get familiar with the likes of a Jasper or a Copy AI or, Copysmith or Longshot. There's a whole bunch of them. So like, it doesn't really matter which one, but like conceptually use one of those and then try to see in comparison to your normal editorial process, which, I guess most SEOs or freelance writers or copywriters, etc. have. So how much time could you possibly be saving when you don't have to build everything from scratch, but rather, you dump something in and then you get potentially, especially for content where you need mass creation, I think right now, where you get something back that you then would need to be editing. So, granted, editing and especially fact checking is very important because, again, AIs, they don't write content. It's generative AI, and that means they basically use the input that they get from training data and then they produce output. So technically they're not writing, they're just using what they have learned and then they kind of, applying that in as to create a text. So yes, fact checking is super important. Never ever publish something without fact checking. And of course, there's also style and things that need to be considered. But nevertheless, what we're seeing in a hybrid or in a combined approach is that you can gain speed or save resources, right? Either way. So I think familiarizing yourself with those tools is certainly, I think, one overarching tip that I would look into. Yeah.
And if you're impressed with what GTB3 can deliver, GTB4 is coming down the line as well. And I believe that that's significantly potentially better than GTB3.
That's entirely correct. Release is not yet confirmed, but a general trend that you could see with AI tools in general is that the bigger the training data is, the better the output is. And in GTB4, at least based on an interview that has been done by the CEO with OpenAI, it's supposed to be 500 times bigger in comparison to what we have with GPT-3 right now. So you could expect, similar to what we've witnessed back in the day from GPT-2 to 3, and that that range, or let's say that scale, wasn't as significant. If I recall correctly, it was 140-ish times 2 to 3. So I think there is going to be a massive bump up in terms of what those AI will be able to do. And yeah, I think you're completely right.
Yeah, so that's ridiculous. It's like going from a 2G phone straight to 5G.
That's a very good comparison. Yeah, true.
So let's bring us up to point number 2, which is brainstorming, time saving.
Yeah, if we go back to the concept of, let's say AI has been all about training data. In a regular workflow, when you kind of go into producing content, I suppose what a lot of the editorial teams do is that they kind of start out with the concept phase, right? And that means obviously getting familiar with the topic, potentially reading something, wherever that is, can be on websites, can be manuals, depending on what kind of type of content you produce, right? But technically speaking, I suppose there's always going to be some kind of conceptual / research phase in the very beginning that needs to happen. And if you think about it conceptually, I think what you could also achieve, not only, as I've been saying in tip number 1, to generate content, you could also just go and kind of, for example, when you go into these interfaces, you could say I only want headlines. So you dump in a whole bunch of keywords and you just look at all the headlines that those tools actually spit out, because what they do is they have consumed a lot of input. Therefore, the output is basically the most common overlap. So again, it could also help, if you think about the kind of Google's concept of people also ask, and the kind of related questions that they're showing in the search results. Think about that in a similar concept. So you could save time because you don't have to look at 1,000 different resources. Instead, you get the most popular ones kind of out of those AI tools straight away. And you could even combine it if you're not really feeling okay, I don't want to go all in on AI content production. So it's maybe sitting a bit in the middle. There's also at least a whole bunch of assisted writing tools. So basically, it's a bit like an auto-completion, as we've been kind of familiar from Google's documents or any other language tool. So a writer, for example, is probably one that comes to mind, where you start typing something and then it suggests you something else, almost a bit like an autocomplete. So that somewhat sits a bit in the middle. But yeah, I think the time-saving aspect on both sides, production-wise, but also on the research side, I think would be one thing. Even if you don't feel like you use it for production, use it to make your life easier and speed up the initial part of the process.
Yeah, and make sure that you don't miss out on any potential opportunities as well. Yeah,
fair point. That's also true.
And point number 3, tip number 3, is to use AI to generate static imagery.
Yeah, that's a bit of the same concept, that obviously beyond just the good old text that we all love and that the search engines still kind of need one way or the other. But I mean, similar to GPT-3 and it's kind of, making it more mainstream, it's the same for imagery. There's DALL-E, and now actually with DALL-E 2, which is a generative AI for imagery. And it kind of works the same way. So you basically, with an input, provide AI with guidance. You say, okay, I want a black Doberman in the streets of New York, as an example. And what you would get is, you would get a variety of 4 to 5 different images. And what's really interesting to observe already right now is that, yes, granted, there might be sometimes rendering mistakes or slight rendering issues. So it's not going to be always perfect, but what you could see, and again, it goes back to the concept of this training that you would see, well, that dog comes with 2 types of ears, right? So one is cropped and one's like standing up. So it's really interesting to witness what the machines in this case already know. But like the reason why I'm mainly mentioning it is that I would be not very much surprised if we see stock photos and stock photo sites, which frankly are really boring anyways, and a lot of times very repetitive. And if you're in the internet as long as I am, you have seen stock photos like literally a million times on different websites, and you can instantly spot when you're looking at the stock photos and you're like, someone tried to put imagery and it's not really cool. So I'm a big advocate for original imagery if you do imagery. And I think this is something. The reason why I'm very excited about the fact is that there's generative AI for imagery is that oftentimes when you look at the big challenges for like smaller organizations, they simply can't afford to have like a design team or, even like, give this to like a professional designer. And I think maybe not right now, but again, it's more like getting familiar with the concept and you start playing with it, that you see what's actually possible straight away. But I think in the future, in the near future, we will be seeing this getting much better as well. There's evolution there, similar to, as you've been correctly pointing out, with like GPT-3 to 4. It's the same there as well. So the images will be getting better and better and better. And actually, in fact, I gave a keynote the other day where I had the audience compare images. One was a stock photo and the other one was generated by AI. And it's very interesting. There were like 5 photos and like it was 1,000 people there. And only one of them has been identified correctly as what it was. But all the other ones, people were like, okay, this is a stock photo, but in fact, it was a generative AI. So I think there's a very, very steep learning curve also from that perspective. So I'm really excited about that. So I think my tip 3 would be to get really familiar with generative AI for images, because there's so many cool things happening there. You can play with. It's not only DALL-E. You can play with Dream Studio, which is using what's called stable diffusion. So there's a whole bunch of them. Just again, get familiar with the concept, see what's already possible, because that's definitely coming.
And I see there are even some WordPress plugins nowadays that you can automatically detect or the text, obviously use the text within the blog post and automatically generate the image based upon that.
This is extremely exciting, because what happened is that DALL-E, just like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think they released an API. You're entirely correct. And obviously the WordPress plugins, and not only WordPress, but also for some other CMSs I've seen first implementations, they basically then use the content. They do like a content extraction, or as you said, they use the tags as an input. They fire it against the API. So what you get back is maybe a relevant like hero or header image for your post. So I think on that front, again, it's a lot about what I've been saying early on. It's a lot about efficiency and making processes much easier. So Microsoft, for example, they are an early investor into OpenAI, and I believe there's actually even talks where they want to increase their participation. But on a side, what I find very interesting is that they're pushing extremely hard on the integration. So for example, what they'll be rolling out is an integration into the Edge browser, where you have a sidebar, and basically on the sidebar, it triggers a Bing image search, and Bing image search doesn't return anything. You can create like an image on the fly straight in the browser and use a drag and drop and put it, for example, when you want to do a social media post update. So the workflow is really smart, and you don't need to go like, okay, I go to a stock photo site, I find something, I need to edit it, I need to drag and drop it there. So it's like, I think, again, it's a lot about time saving and making things a whole less painless, which I think is really exciting.
And related to that, tip 4 is to use AI to generate video.
Yeah, this is still a bit early days, but nevertheless, a super impressive concept. So first on that front, I think, at least to the wider audience, has been Meta, where they pushed out a technology, or showcased, not pushed out, to be fair. They showcased a technology called Make a Video. And the idea is essentially the same thing, similar to what I've been describing with the imagery in itself. You could also generate video or video scenes, to be fair. So this is not like full movie length video, but I mean, because the challenge, right, with dynamic images, or let's say video in this case, is not only does the AI need to create the pixels at the right point, but they also need to predict where the pixels are going to be moving to. And this obviously is not as simple, because the training data, I mean, there's not so much video training data than there is text training data, as for like, a GPT-3 and the like. So training those models is a very, very big task. And this is also why, so Meta was the first, and then Google was almost literally a week after. I was like, yeah, no, we're not having this. We also need to release what we are having. So Google put out what's called Imagine Video. And it has essentially the same idea or the same concept. And on top of it, they were like, we're Google, so, we don't have just one, we have two. So they also published what's called Fenaki. And the interesting approach with Fenaki is that, opposite to the two aforementioned, you could even think about this as being able to generate different scenes. So the prompt, like the input, that can change over time. So I think there's something to be coming in the near future that also would help us. For example, a lot of the images in social media advertising are kind of being replaced by video, right? People want like dynamic content. So I imagine if you look at the use case, well, potentially it could be that in the, not today and not tomorrow, but in the near future, we'll also be having tools at hand that allow us to create video clips, or like, short time video that can be used for that. It goes back to my point from earlier. It will probably help also like the smaller advertisers to have better ads, or dynamic ads, or both.
It's incredible to think what's coming down the line. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised that in 10 years' time, it's possible to take a book or a movie script, give it to the AI, and it'll actually create a movie from the written material.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the curve, like this, the speed, the acceleration that we're currently seeing in AI, if you look at 5 years back versus what's coming in the next 5 years, it's incredible, because we're like just about to really lift off. So yeah, I agree. I think there's going to be some very, very exciting things coming down the line. Yeah.
So that finishes up at tip number 5, which is prompt optimization.
Yeah, I think this is a thing that people just don't have on their radar right now, but it's true for all the previous mentioned like tool approaches or input approaches, because what you do, at least right now, as a user, you basically need to tell the AI, if you so will, what are you expecting to get back. So this is what we call a prompt, right? So it's essentially like an input to a machine, and then the machine takes the input, ideally understands the input, maybe parses it in different ways, shapes, and forms, and extracts what it needs from it, and then returns you some content. And that can be an image, that can be a video, that can be potentially audio, that can be text. It doesn't really matter. But like generally speaking, prompts are what, at least right now, are incredibly important, because the better you are at formulating what you're expecting, the better the results are. And then that again is a time saver, but also, I mean, most of the AIs somewhat are like they work with a credit-based system or like API calls. So it's also like if you're using them heavily, it's also like from a cost perspective, it's an important skill to not like having to refine what you're looking for like 100 times, because obviously you're paying for that like then 100 times, but rather be very much on point with what you're trying to get out of it. And what people don't understand, I think, about the concept of prompts is it's not like, I mean, I had a very simple example with the Doberman in the streets of New York, but you might, envision an image, a certain image, and it could be grainy, or it could be of high quality, or it should look like it has been produced by the Unreal Engine, or there's a whole bunch of different things, or super high quality, or you want a square image, or you want something entirely different. And I've seen prompts on imagery that are literally like a full page on with just description as to how precise you want it. So what I believe is that the skill or the tradecraft of actually being able to formulate very, very precise prompts is one thing that marketers really need to kind of get familiar with, because even if in the, a couple of years down the line, we might not be so reliant on the prompt in itself anymore. So the skill, might change over time, but at least in the very near future, and also I guess in the next at least 2 years, this is how AI will be controlled, or how you will be able to get the best results out of it. So I think formulating prompts, precise prompts, the best possible prompts, either way, I think it's going to be a killer skill for marketers anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I was laughing a little bit because it reminded me of a long time ago, going back to about 2004, when I was using a website called Rent-A-Coder to outsource the design of a website that I was producing. This is before Odesk or Upwork or other sites like that. And I think I wrote about 100 emails to actually define exactly what I wanted this person to design. And that kind of skill, that prompting skill, is similar to what you do for outsourcing to actually get your tasks done to the manner that you want. Yeah,
very, very true. It's a very fair comparison. I was literally saying the same to a friend the other day, where I kind of looked at some of this stuff feels a bit like a throwback to old days where we need to kind of provide very precise input to a machine, just that we're getting very different results these days. But yeah, you're right.
Well, let's finish off with
the Pareto pickle.
So Pareto says that you can get 80% of your results from 20% of your efforts. So what's one SEO activity that you would recommend that provides incredible results for modest levels of effort?
Well, right now, going back to my, I think, second tip, just use AI-assisted writing tools, because you're just getting significantly faster. Content production times go down incredibly, and therefore you just be able to push out more. And as we all know right now, content makes the search engines tick. So if you produce more for less, then I guess that's a win.
Superb. I've been your host, David Bain. You can find Bastian over at peakace.agency. Bastian, thanks so much for being on the In Search SEO podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for listening. Check out all the previous episodes and sign up for a free trial of the Rank Ranger platform over at rankranger.com.